Welcome, everyone, to this Mindful Moments podcast. This is a space where we can connect with people in our community and learn and talk about what mindfulness can look like in different situations inside and outside of the classroom. My name's Lilly. I am the founder of Mindful Sparks, and today I'm joined by Maeve Downey. Maeve is a homeschool teacher and also one of the trainers here at Mindful Sparks. So Maeve is a passionate advocate for mindfulness and wellness and has a background in biochemistry. She's been living and working in Thailand for 9 years, and it was here that she discovered her true calling in teaching, both in the classroom and outside of it. Her move to Thailand ignited her passion for meditation, mindfulness, yoga, breathwork, and flow arts. And she became fascinated with exploring how these transformational tools can enhance our personal lives and the lives of students and communities around us. So in addition to working at Mindful Sparks, Maeve dedicates her time to teaching an upper elementary homeschool group, facilitating breathwork journeys, and teaching movement classes on the island of Koh Samui. So Maeve is a key member of the Mindful Sparks team, and with her experience in the classroom and outside of it as a breathwork facilitator, she's brought so much experience, compassion, and joy and fun to the team. So we're really excited that you get to hear a little bit more about Maeve and her relationship with mindfulness. So thank you so much for joining us today, Maeve. I know it's early for you. You're in New York at the moment, so I appreciate you getting up a little bit earlier to join us. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, happy to be here, Lily. Always happy to chat and share what my experience has been around mindfulness and yeah, bring up different things about it. I think it's a super cool space to be in.
So let's start at the beginning. Like what did mindfulness look like for you in the beginning when you first started to learn about it? And what did your practices kind of look like?
So I think the first way I kind of dipped my toes into the world of mindfulness was through meditation. I went to a 2 week long meditation retreat when I was hiking in Nepal towards the end of my trekking journey. And it kind of blew my mind, like this experience of zooming out and looking intentionally at like your thoughts and your feelings and the sensations in your body. I just never done it before or never really heard of it. And I was obsessed with it. And I really got into meditation, like in a quite strict way, like really 20, 30 minutes of formal practice in the morning, which was really amazing to make a habit of doing this. But it also was quite strict, and it came kind of with those like images or ideas of what meditation is supposed to look like and what you're supposed to be thinking of. And while I still really value meditation, when I started learning more about mindfulness and the way that you could be mindful while you were doing anything, walking, eating, moving your body, I really connected with that as well, because it was like, oh, I can get all the benefits of meditation and being able to kind of zoom out and look at what's happening in my mind and my body, but without that strictness of like sitting and not being able to move or not being able to kind of feel into what's going on. So yeah, I started through meditation, but then I kind of moved through yoga and learning to be mindful and moving. And then I kind of took that piece and put that into a lot of different movements that I love. Like I do flow arts, which I think is a really beautiful way to connect with movement and kind of moving meditation. And then, yeah, I started to get into how can I connect mindfulness, which is this piece of my life now that I love, and also my work, which is teaching in the classroom. And so I started to study how can we use mindfulness in the classroom. I trained with mindful schools how to do that. And that kind of brought me to connect with you and then finding other ways of like, how can we continue this, bringing mindfulness into like the school environment. Um, yeah, so I love to see how it started with one thing, and then once I learned about being mindful, it's kind of like it spread into all the areas of my life that are important to me, like movement and my job and my community. So um yeah, I think it's such a cool thing, and I'm so happy that I found it.
That's really awesome. And I love how you touched upon how at the beginning it was quite structured and, there was a lot of consistency in the sense of kind of the same time every day, using the same practice to build like that foundation of understanding and of knowledge. And then as you got more comfortable with that, how that you could be more flexible with it. And that's something that's come up in a few other conversations that I've been having with other people, and definitely with myself as well, like how I find benefit in times, of having quite a rigid practice. And that's usually when there's a lot of chaos or a lot of imbalance going on in other areas of my life. It helps kind of ground me down. But then at the same time, after a while of committing to that, I feel a bit like antsy with it in a way. And then I want to focus on other ways. Like you're saying, you can be mindful in any aspect of your life. So I think that's really awesome to hear the experiences you've had and the different ways it shows up in your life. I think it's awesome.
I think you're totally right too, in that there's different times when maybe like a strict practice is better and it's really useful. And I still sometimes feel that way of like, ooh, maybe I need to come back to saying like, okay, I set a time every morning, especially, yeah, when things get really hectic. Maybe there's not a lot of like schedule or routine in other parts of your life. But then there's also times where it's like, no, I think I need that flexibility to be able to practice mindfulness like in a different way every day for the way it suits me best. So, yeah, I think that's one really great thing that mindfulness brought me to, that maybe meditation and the other methods that I hadn't before had, which is giving you that like grace and the flexibility to say like it's okay for it to look different every day, and that's actually like a really beautiful thing.
Mm. And did you notice any differences, like when you were in, say, at the beginning of the journey, when it was a little bit more rigid, a little bit more stricter in that sense? Did you notice any differences in the way that, like, your relationship with the practice was compared to when it is a bit more flexible? Because, like, I noticed, for example, when I get, and especially when I was starting out, and I also started through meditation, and, I have to, and this is exactly like you said, like, this is what a meditation should look like, right? I should be sitting on a cushion on the floor and I should have my legs crossed and da da da, because that's what had been portrayed to me and that's what I'd seen. And if I wasn't adhering to that, I would notice like shame coming in or a bit of guilt coming in. But now, when I have a bit more of a flexible practice, I still hold myself accountable. If you checked into it with yourself today, like, you've been a bit distracted, but I notice less shame and less guilt with that. Would you say that's similar to your experience, or have you had a different experience?
Yeah, I would definitely say I feel the same way. Something else that I've also noticed is in the beginning, if I was feeling frustrated or angry or sad or like an uncomfortable emotion, it was like my approach was using meditation or using mindfulness to try and stop feeling that. As in like, okay, I'm gonna sit down and meditate, and like hopefully then that will go away. I need to like get myself into like a right frame of mind. Whereas now I feel like I use meditation and mindfulness as a way to see these emotions or sensations from a different perspective, or experience them in a different way and stay curious about them, as opposed to like trying to make them go away or trying to change them.
Hmm. That's really interesting. And yeah, I mean, obviously, it's one thing we talk about quite a lot in the trainings and the workshops that we do, is that the real foundation with any mindfulness practice, however it shows up in your life, is to have that curiosity of just checking in and going, how am I doing right now? Like, how am I feeling? What's my mental state at? What's my emotional state at? How's my body doing? And that really can be such a powerful question to open up, so many kind of conversations around, actually, how am I doing right now? And I love how you talked about the way, instead of trying to make them stop, it's now just looking at it from a different perspective. And you've mentioned a couple times about zooming out. Is that what that process is? Like, that zooming out, is it looking at it from a different point of view?
Yeah, definitely. I always really love the analogy of like kind of being inside a big storm, like when you're having really strong emotions or sensations or thoughts, it's like really hard to get your bearings when you're right in the middle of it. But what mindfulness does for me, at least, is to like kind of pull outside. So you're not necessarily, yeah, making the storm go away or trying to like run in a different direction from it, but zooming out and pulling out and seeing it from a different perspective and being like, oh wow, like look at that frustration or look at that anger instead of being the anger like all surrounding you. So yeah, I think zooming out is like a really good way to describe the feeling of that. And I think it's just super human. It's everyone, when you have an uncomfortable emotion, like of course you're gonna resist and try and get away from it, or use the coping habits that you have. And I think I've gotten softer and more gentle with myself in that, like that's always gonna be part of it. But mindfulness really helps me kind of cut down the amount of time in that I'm stuck in that kind of like pushing away, resisting tension part with the emotion, and like giving me the opportunity to sooner rather than later pull out and do the like wow. And sometimes all you can do is a moment pull out and be like wow, look at that, and then you go back into it, but at least you have that moment. And yeah, shortening that time in which you remember to do that is what's been like really helpful for me for sure.
That's really cool. I love that analogy. And another analogy you do, like when we went to Singapore earlier this year to do the training, and when you were talking to the kids, I'd love for you to kind of talk a bit more about this, but when you were talking about the flashlight and the direction that you're pointing the flashlight, like I thought that was so easy to grasp as a concept, because I think mindfulness as a concept it's quite abstract sometimes. It can be quite hard to understand what it is, especially when there's a bit of crossover between, is it meditation, is it yoga? So do you want to explain a little bit like the flashlight thing and kind of how maybe that's helped, in the more professional side of it, taking it into the classroom?
Yeah. Ooh, let's see if I can remember. It's funny sometimes when you do these presentations, like things come out and you're like, oh, that was good. Yeah, I hope that will stick later. Um, yeah, so I think of mindfulness as like if you imagine a flashlight and the beam of the flashlight is our awareness or like what we're paying attention to. So normally from the moment you wake up, like the beam is just continually pointing from one thing to another. And it's usually things like outside of us, like other people, tasks that we need to do, things that we're looking at, things that we're hearing. Like it's just like moving around, moving around, moving around all the time. So what mindfulness can be thought of is like taking the beam, if you could separate the beam from the flashlight and then turning the beam around to face the flashlight. So actually looking at the source of all of the source of the awareness of that's usually pointing towards other things, the source of all those thoughts, feelings, and emotions, which isn't something we kind of like naturally do. So I think hearing it in that way, being like, oh yeah, like turning it around to face the source is like a nice way to explain it.
Yeah. And I know that you've been doing some great work with bringing mindfulness into the classroom, especially with your homeschooling group. Like, so they're a bit older, right? They're like 10 years old,
At
around
11, yeah.
11, yeah.
Mhm.
And how was that what did that look like when you started maybe bringing these words in, bringing these ideas in through to, when you finished with them at the end of the academic year, when they'd had a bit more exposure to it? What did that look like?
Mm. So it was actually really different with the homeschool group I'm teaching. I used to work with younger kids, like kindergarten to like year 3, year 4. And I found with them a kind of a more like direct approach to mindfulness worked pretty well. Like still doing like small little chunks of activities, just like mindfulness through listening, mindfulness through drawing, like little activities, but you could kind of present it pretty directly and they would be into it. Whereas the older the kids got, I found that there was more resistance to that kind of direct, like, okay, we're going to practice mindfulness. It was like, like, you get to the eye rolling stage. It's not as cool. So I was like, all right, how do we approach it in a different way? And one way I found was really useful with them was a lot through discussion of like personal experience. Like maybe we focus on a certain emotion or feeling that, and then we kind of share like different experiences that we've had through that. And instead of kind of a direct like sitting silently going through that, or you know, um talking, doing discussion first and kind of getting them to do that zoom out motion of like, oh, at that moment when you had that huge feeling of frustration, like what was your body feeling? Or like how did that change what your inner dialogue was? And having them through conversation kind of turn that flashlight beam around and do it first through that way. And then maybe after the conversation and introduce a little bit of mindfulness of like, okay, let's tune into our bodies right in this moment and like, what are we feeling? Or let's use our sense of hearing for just like a minute or two.
Mm.
So that was a different shift that I saw. Was like, oh, okay, so for different ages, sometimes or just different personalities of kids in the classroom, you might need to play around a little bit until you find kind of that path through to mindfulness that works for them, and it's gonna be different. So yeah, that was the way that I found this year worked. And I'm still doing the homeschool group this year. They're another year older, so I'll probably need to find a different path as they get older. And that's cool. Like it's good for me to yeah, continually experiment with that and not kind of get stale in the way that I approach it.
Mm. And to bring it back to what we were saying earlier as well about curiosity, right? Like the way we get curious and what we get curious about changes as we grow. And we've already talked about like how our mindfulness practices have changed. So it stands to reason that, of course, kids are going to go through the same experience. And especially when they're new to it and they're exploring it, in their own way, they're going to want to be like, well, I want to try this, or this isn't cool anymore. Like we don't do this anymore. We do something else now. Like the older they get. I mean, I've had the same experience with teens, and it's like, this is great with 8-year-olds, but it falls flat with 14-year-olds. So
Yeah.
how do we keep, and I think it's so important what you said about conversation, right? Like when we're bringing mindfulness into the classroom, this isn't a adult telling the child, I know this information, you don't, here's a way that I can give you this information, or you need to learn this. Just, it's so much more of a shared experience of being like, let's all do this together, and almost like compare notes. Like, how was it for you? What did you experience? What did you notice? What are you aware of? And for me, that's been one of the real ways of breaking down those barriers, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I felt that too. Or like, I've noticed that emotion as well. And you can see the kids looking at you like, what? Like, you're the teacher. What? Like, you suddenly become human and you're not just the teacher again anymore to them. But yeah, it's a fun journey, I think. And it'll be interesting to see now they are older, but because you have a relationship with them and because they have they've already got experience with you and with mindfulness, to see how that develops.
Yeah. Yeah. And when all else fails, always mindful eating. That's a hit, no matter the age.
Yeah, very, very true. Very, very true. And have you noticed, we've talked quite a lot about like mindfulness practices in the personal context and what that looks like as you bringing it in to the classroom. But have you noticed how your personal mindfulness practice impacts or shows up within the professional context, be it with the students in the class, or maybe when you're doing breath work, or, your other, was it flow movements that you do?
Definitely. Yeah. I really think that although doing formal practices with mindfulness with them and like putting aside time to do that during class is 100% helpful and important, I still think that maybe the most powerful examples that we can set and ways that we can kind of start integrating mindfulness into the classroom and into students' lives is to do it ourselves and to practice it ourselves and have those like organic moments come up where we can show what a real mindfulness practice looks like in real time when maybe we are feeling really frustrated or angry or we're having kind of an overwhelm of emotions. Like verbalizing that process for them. So if I am feeling, yeah, a little overwhelmed, or I'm feeling frustrated with the way that something's going in the classroom, I'll tell them, I'll say, I'm feeling really frustrated right now, but I don't want to yell and I don't want to say something that later I wish I could take back. So I'm gonna go to the side right now. I'm gonna take a few breaths and then I'm gonna come back and we'll figure this out together. So something like that. Um, happens often. And something really cool happened towards the end of the year. They had these group projects that were going on, and they were going to present them to the parents. And always when the parents come in, when they're presenting something, it's like they're nervous, the tensions run a little bit high. And we kind of talked beforehand also of like, okay, realizing that that tends to happen for us. So we're just going to be aware of it. And there was kind of an argument going on about who was going to go first. Nobody wanted to go first. And they were getting frustrated. Nobody was kind of budging, and they were sitting there trying to figure it out and arguing. And I remember one of the students said, like, I'm feeling right now that feeling like when you're in an argument and you just like don't want to lose. Like she was like, I don't actually care anymore about not going first or second, but like I'm just having that feeling of like I can't say yes because I don't want to lose. And so then one of the other students said, like, okay, maybe we should just stop talking about it now, and like maybe we'll just go away for like 20 minutes and then we'll come back and see what happened. And it was me being like, it was such a cool moment because I was kind of sitting in the background. I wasn't really like participating. I was just watching it, making sure everyone stayed like, respectful. But to see them kind of do that zoom out of like, oh, okay, this is what we're feeling, like this is what's happening. So maybe let's just like take a moment and then we'll come back to it. That was like, wow, like, and that would never have happened. You couldn't take that scenario and like put it in a formal mindfulness practice, but to just watch them do that in real time was so cool. And it was like, okay, that's the point, like that's some of those amazing like capabilities that we're giving them of like in real time being able to step back and say like, okay, here's what's happening. Here's like a way that we can move forward together. Yeah.
That's an awesome story. And when you have those moments, because mindfulness is definitely something that, like, it's not like, oh, by 7 you can do this, and by age 8 you can do this, and by the end of term 1 you'll be able to do this. Like, it doesn't work that way. And you can have years of exposure to practicing it and conversations around it and reading about it, but it still might not really click for you until there's just the right stimulus, or there's just the right challenge that makes you kind of go, oh, now I can put into practice skills that I've read about or I've heard about. And to be able to watch that in real time happening, knowing that that seed you've planted is beginning to sprout now, it's beginning to make sense to them. So instead of arguing, and like, I mean, what that realization of, actually, I don't care if I go first or not. What I'm actually more stubborn about is I don't want to step down from this argument. I mean, that's a massive awareness. And how many people, honestly, hand on heart, as an adult, could say, actually, that's really what my motivation is for this argument now. I don't really care of the outcome. I'm too proud to step down. Like, it's really, really
Yeah.
awesome. Really awesome. Cool. So just to bring this conversation, I mean, there's so many more things I'd love to talk to you about, as always, and I'm sure we can maybe have another conversation at a later date. But to bring this one to a close, something we ask everyone that we chat with here, about 60% of people that come to our workshops or trainings have heard of mindfulness, but they don't feel confident to really explain what it is. They couldn't really put it into words in a clear and concise way what it is. So we're asking people, in your own words, how do you explain what mindfulness is? What does it mean to you?
I'm trying to think of a way to describe it without using the same analogies I've been using, but maybe I'll just stick with them to stay consistent. Yeah, I love the flashlight beam analogy of like turning around that flashlight beam to point at the source of our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, when normally it's just pointing outward to other things. So learning how to have that little voice inside that goes like, maybe I should take a second and turn my awareness inwards and just see what's going on with that sense of like curiosity and kindness, instead of that, like, what's going on in here? Is it right or wrong? To just say like, what is happening in here? And how can I look at it and just like step outside for a little bit and be the observer? That's what it is for me.
Nice. I like it. Very, very cool. And it, for me, I'm a very visual person, so immediately I can just see, the flashlight coming in. I think that's really cool. Well, thank you so much, Maeve. It's been lovely chatting with you, and I can't wait till we can catch up again in person. It's been a while, but I really appreciate you taking the time to have a chat today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day today. And I look forward to chatting with you soon.
So thanks so much, Lily.
Take care.